What happens when a top late-night host tries to embarrass a guest live on air? It took just 34 seconds and one sarcastic remark for Jimmy Kimmel to damage his own reputation and remind everyone that some celebrities truly believe they're above criticism. The stage lights were blazing. Mark Wahlberg walked out with the confidence of someone who belonged there, and he did. He had just wrapped up a promotional tour for his latest action film, and the purpose of his visit was clear: talk about his work, his family, and maybe share a few laughs with the crowd. But Jimmy had a different idea. "Mark, welcome back to the show," Kimmel said, flashing a fake grin like he was doing Mark a favor. Then came the jab. "How does it feel being Hollywood's most overpaid tough guy?" The audience froze. The silence was thick. Mark clenched his jaw but stayed calm, responding, "Jimmy, I'm here to talk about the movie. The crew put a lot into this." But Kimmel wasn't letting up. He leaned back smugly in that chair of his, like he was king of comedy. "Oh, come on, Mark. Everyone knows you just show up, flex, say a few lines, and walk away with $20 million. He grinned. "Must be nice having it that easy." Mark's eyes locked on him. This wasn't joking anymore, it was personal. Easy life? Try waking up at 4 a.m. every day, training for months, doing your own stunts, while others sit behind desks cracking jokes about real work. The heat in the room seemed to spike. Jimmy didn't expect that. "Whoa, someone's touchy," he said, chuckling awkwardly, trying to stay in control. "Not everyone gets handed roles because they look the part." That's when Jimmy crossed the line. Mark leaned forward. The intensity in his eyes was impossible to ignore. "Handed to me? Do you know what I was doing at 15? I was out on the streets trying to survive. You were probably in some elite college learning how to mock people for a living." The audience was completely still. Even the camera crew seemed to pause. This wasn't going how anyone expected. Kimmel laughed nervously. "Hey, I'm just messing around. It's all jokes, Mark. Relax." But Mark wasn't letting it slide. "You invite me on your show and then tear down everything I've worked for? You think just because you have a mic and an audience, you can say whatever you want?" Mark's voice was strong and serious, not loud, but intense enough to hold everyone's attention. "I've been acting for over 20 years. I've produced films, started businesses, and tried to give back. And you think I don't deserve any of it?" Jimmy was visibly uncomfortable now. His confident host act was falling apart live on television. "Look, I didn't mean yes you did," Mark interrupted. "You thought you could make me out to be some dumb musclehead just to get a few laughs. But here's the truth, Jimmy. I wasn't born into this. I didn't have family connections or a safety net. Everything I have I earned." The audience shifted in their seats. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked stunned to see someone challenge their beloved host. Jimmy made another attempt to steer things back. Okay. Let's move on. Tell us about the movie." "No," Mark said flatly. "You started this. So let's talk. You want real? I was arrested as a teen. I made serious mistakes that hurt people, and I've spent my adult life trying to make up for them." The rawness in Mark's voice couldn't be ignored. This wasn't a scripted speech, this was real. "I work 16-hour days on set. I'm studying scripts late into the night. I train with actual fighters and law enforcement to make the performance real for the fans. And you call that easy?" Jimmy looked completely lost. This wasn't what his writers had prepared him for. "Mark, I think maybe you're taking this too seriously." "Too seriously? My work is my life. The teams I work with, the stories we tell, the audience that supports us, they matter. What doesn't matter is someone sitting behind a desk tossing out cheap shots." The cameras didn't cut away. They caught every moment, every word. This wasn't just a late-night interview anymore. It was something else entirely. Mark leaned in again. You want to know the difference between us, Jimmy? When I mess up, people lose jobs, movies lose money, and fans lose trust. But you? You mock someone today, and tomorrow you do it all over again like nothing happened. Jimmy was clearly rattled. He reached for his coffee mug, hands slightly trembling. Mark's voice sliced through the tension. You know what's really easy? Hiding behind jokes. Acting like tearing people down is somehow entertainment. Jimmy's hand stopped mid-air. He was trying to stay composed, but the pressure was too visible. Kimmel reached for his cup again, clearly flustered, but Mark wasn't done. Let's not take a break, he said, leaning forward with purpose. You brought this up live on your show, so let's talk it through right here. You think I don't see what you really think about guys like me? That we're just muscle and no brains? The audience was frozen in place. Phones came out. People started filming, realizing they were watching something unforgettable. I've been around long enough to know the difference between someone who respects actors and someone who just sees us as jokes. Mark continued. And right now you're showing everyone who you really are. Kimmel gave an awkward laugh, but it didn't land. Come on, Mark. You're being way too sensitive. It's just comedy. People expect me to tease the guests a little. Mark's eyebrows rose. Tease? That's what you call it. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like you're just being mean. There's a big difference between being funny and being cruel, Jimmy. The sweat was starting to show on Kimmel's forehead. His usual confidence had all but disappeared. If I offended you, I'm sorry. That wasn't my goal. Mark shook his head slowly. Your goal was to make me look foolish so the audience would laugh. To lift yourself up by putting someone else down. Don't insult me by pretending that wasn't the plan. Off camera, producers were signaling wildly, unsure of how to stop what was happening. But Mark kept going. You know what bothers me most? It's not even about me. It's about the young actors, the newcomers. The ones trying to break into this business who have to sit in this chair and let people like you belittle their dreams just so they can promote their work. Kimmel was visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting toward the wings, maybe hoping someone would step in. I'm lucky. I've made it. I can speak up for myself, Mark said, his voice steady. But what about the kid from Boston or Chicago who's working 3 jobs to pay for acting school? What happens when he sits across from you and you decide his story isn't worth taking seriously? Mark's words hit like a hammer. He wasn't just defending himself now. He was speaking for a whole generation of creatives. Kimmel tried to cut in again. Mark, I think you're overreacting. But Mark stood up. The entire studio fell silent. You want to see overreacting? He said. That would be me walking over there and showing you what a real tough guy does. But I'm not going to do that. You know why? Because I'm a professional. Kimmel's face went pale. It was clear he was afraid that Mark might actually confront him physically. But instead, Mark sat back down and stared straight at him. No, I'm going to sit here and explain why this kind of behavior is wrong. This industry is already tough. People in your position shouldn't use their voice to drag others down. The silence in the room stretched on. Everyone was too stunned to speak. Finally, Jimmy found his voice again. Okay, I hear you. Maybe I went a little too far with the jokes. Mark let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. A little too far? Jimmy, you basically went on national TV and called me a talentless fraud. That's not going too far, that's a full-on attack on my character. Kimmel didn't know what to say. Every word was only making it worse. I didn't mean it like that, he said, scrambling. Then how did you mean it? Mark asked. I'm sitting right here. Look me in the eye and explain what you were really trying to say when you called me overpaid and undeserving. But Jimmy couldn't do it. He looked at his notes, at the cameras, anywhere but at Mark. That's what I thought, Mark said, his voice lower now but still firm. You love making jokes about people, but when someone finally pushes back, you can't handle it. The audience was locked in. This wasn't just late-night television anymore. This was raw, real, and unfiltered. You know what's sad? Mark continued. You actually have talent. You're funny when you want to be. You could use this show to build people up, to highlight their achievements, to give them respect. But instead, you choose to punch down. Jimmy finally looked up, but something had changed in his eyes. Maybe shame, maybe regret. Whatever it was, it made him lash out. You think you're better than me? He snapped, finally losing control. Just because you've done some movies, you think that makes you better? Everyone knows about your past, Mark. You were a thug before you ever stepped onto a film set. The room went absolutely still. Even the cameras seemed to stop. Mark's face didn't change, but there was a chill in his eyes now. There it is, he said calmly. That's the real Jimmy Kimmel. When the jokes stop working, you go straight for the personal attacks. The audience collectively held its breath. Jimmy knew he'd gone too far, but it was already done. Mark, I didn't mean yes you did, Mark said coldly. You've been waiting for the perfect chance to bring up my past. You thought if you pushed hard enough, I'd explode, and you'd get the clip you wanted. Jimmy was falling apart. This wasn't just a bad interview anymore, it was a disaster. That's not true. I would never, but you just did, Mark said, rising to his feet. The entire room froze. You brought up my past. Fine. Let's talk about it. Yes, I made mistakes when I was young, Mark said, standing tall. Serious mistakes that hurt real people. And you know what I did, Jimmy? Kimmel couldn't respond. He sat frozen, caught in his own mess. I took responsibility, Mark continued, voice rising with conviction. I didn't hide behind comedy. I didn't laugh it off. I went back and apologized to those I hurt. I worked for years to become a better person. Each word hit like a blow, chipping away at the polished image Jimmy Kimmel had built. But what you just did, using someone's past against them on national television, that says more about who you are right now, not who I was 20 years ago. Kimmel tried to speak, his voice cracking. Mark, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. But Mark cut him off with a sharp laugh. You're sorry? You're only sorry because this blew up in your face. Because now the whole world sees what kind of person you really are. The audience was dead quiet. Even the camera crew had stopped moving, too stunned to act. You want to know the difference between my past and what you just did? Mark leaned forward slightly. When I made my mistakes, I was a kid from the streets who didn't know any better. But you're a grown man with a massive platform, and you chose to use it to try to tear someone down. Jimmy looked completely broken. His hands trembled, his face pale, sweat dripping from his forehead. I wasn't trying to destroy you, he whispered. Then what were you trying to do? Mark asked, eyes locked on him. Embarrass me for laughs? Make yourself feel better by dragging someone else down? Jimmy had no answer. He just stared, helpless. You know what's really pathetic? Mark's voice dropped, filled with disappointment. I came here to promote a film. A film that gave hundreds of people jobs, people who worked hard to create something entertaining. And you turned it into your own personal ego trip. You made this about tearing me down so you could feel clever. Mark shook his head and started to remove his microphone. Those people deserve better. The audience deserves better. And honestly, so do you, or at least the version of you I thought I was coming to see. Jimmy tried to reach out, desperate. Mark, please don't go. We can fix this. We can edit it. Mark's eyes hardened. Edit it? That's your solution? Pretend it never happened? Jimmy was grasping at anything now. We can start over. Do a new interview. No, Jimmy. Mark cut him off. There's not going to be another interview. There's no redo. This is who you chose to be tonight, and now you have to live with it. He placed the microphone gently on the table, then looked at Kimmel with calm disappointment. You want to know what really hurts about all this? I used to respect you. I really did. I thought you were someone who understood hard work, who respected people. But tonight you showed me that for some people, success doesn't make them better. It just gives them a bigger platform to hurt others. The entire room was silent. Not a sound. You could hear the hum of the AC, the soft whir of cameras still rolling. Mark stood, straightened his jacket, and spoke with finality. I'm leaving now. Not because I'm running away, but because I respect myself too much to sit here while you continue to disrespect me. He turned and walked toward the edge of the stage, but paused, then turned back one last time. And Jimmy, next time you go after someone's character, you better make sure your own can handle the pressure. Kimmel reached out again in a last effort. Mark, please. Don't leave like this. Mark looked at him, and for a brief moment, there was almost pity in his expression. You should have thought about that before you turned this into a hit job. You made your choice. Now deal with it. And with that, Mark Wahlberg stepped off the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live, leaving behind a host whose career would never fully recover from those 34 seconds of arrogance that revealed his true self. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment. Jimmy sat there alone, tears streaking down his face, realizing too late that some boundaries should never be crossed, and some people should never be underestimated. The crowd remained frozen, not in shock from a scripted drama, but from witnessing a real display of dignity, courage, and self-respect in the face of public humiliation. In those final moments, as the reality of it all began to settle over the stunned room, Jimmy Kimmel learned the most painful lesson of his life. Respect is something you earn, not something you get just because you're holding the microphone.